afternoon. My name is Scott Cresswell. I'm a detective with York Regional Police. With me today is Detective Constable Greg O'Connor from Peel Regional Police. We're going to be presenting organized auto theft and trafficking in the GTA and interprovincially. And the name of the project that we're going to be discussing was a joint forces investigation we just completed from January till March. So just quickly to introduce who we are. York Regional Police and Peel Regional Police are the only two dedicated auto and cargo theft teams in Ontario. Currently, we focus on organized crime groups involved in auto and cargo thefts. We also deal with specifically chop shops, locations where vehicles are dismantled. We deal with heavy equipment thefts. Just so a little bit more background about us, what we do is we get some specialized training that helps us to understand the different crime involved with motor vehicles, including revinning, cloning. We also provide expertise on burned out vehicles, and we do expert examinations on cars that are their identity is unknown. Specifically, we do provide quite a bit of assistance to other agencies in the GTA. And within our own service. So the organized crime aspect of auto cargo theft is very prevalent today. We can say that really the majority of our auto theft occurrences involved an organized crime angle. What you can see from the slides there is it really is an international problem where you have these different crime groups involved in the Greater Toronto area, locally, wherever you might be. And those vehicles do, the majority of them do leave the country. They head overseas to specifically ports in Africa, ports in the Middle East. And at that point, they're distributed to buyers in those locations. As you can imagine, the amount of money that can be made is very significant, with the vehicles being sold at what we believe is the Canadian market value overseas. So just to brief you on some of the current auto theft trends that we're experiencing and the GTA services are experiencing. They're not in a specific order, but they are ordered. I'll explain their prevalence with each trend that we're seeing. So if you can see them there, the first one is onboard diagnostic reprogramming. You'll have a relay attack, fraudulent financing, and the owner involved thefts. So in the onboard diagnostic or OBD reprogramming, you'll see these groups of thieves. They'll be targeting specific vehicles in residential periods during overnight hours, and they'll really operate between maybe 1 a.m. and 5, 6 a.m. What these groups will do is they will comb different residential areas. They will locate vehicles that they're interested in. They'll make notes of that, and then they will either attend and, at that moment, or they will come back. But what they do when they get there is they'll gain entry to the vehicle, and that's usually done through force. Lots of times the vehicles are just left unlocked, and that grants them easy access. What we're seeing is a lot of door handle damage, a lot of lock cylinders pulled or drilled out. And then once they gain access to the vehicle, they use different tech devices. There's a bunch of different mediums that can be used to create a new fob. So they essentially log into your vehicle's computer system, and they create themselves a key that is recognized for that vehicle. Essentially what happens is when the owners come out in the morning, and if they did get their car back, their keys don't work anymore because now the crime group's key is the key for the vehicle. We have seen a bit of an uptick in a trend where the crime group will come, they'll target vehicles, and they will essentially record the VIN, the public VIN in your dashboard or in your windshield, and they will take that back and they will reprogram a key off site. And then they come back and they'll be able to just gain access to the vehicle that way. This is the #1 trend that we're seeing for any of the high-end thefts, any serialized thefts. We're not talking one-off auto thefts. This is the serial nature thefts. I'll just show you a little video that we put out. A bit of crime prevention, a bit of community awareness, just to share with the residents in York Region about this theft trend, because it is so prominent right now. And it's just done with the intention of helping people protect their vehicles. As you can see, it's very cavalier. Like the crime group here is just, examining the cars, making ready their theft without too much concern about being seen or the homeowners. If you keep watching here, you'll see that criminals put his phone on the tire. They do that so that they can complete the reprogramming process without having to be present. They'll drop that phone on that tire and they'll kind of retreat to a safe area. So just in case, a homeowner comes out or calls, they're not there and there's less risk to them being caught. And here's something we just put out, some tips for the homeowner to protect their vehicles. If you want to have a look here, this again is related to the onboard diagnostic reprogramming. These are some actual tools seized during arrests of suspects doing this crime. You'll see on the top left, you'll see the large reprogramming device, which is used to connect to the car's computer. You'll see the blank key fobs on the bottom. And that's a sure tell for uniform officers when they stop a car and if there's an arrest made or a search made and they find, X amount of blank key fobs, it's a sure sign they're into reprogramming. And that's just some of the cords on the right-hand side. It shows you that there is a connection just to plug into your smartphone. So essentially your smartphone can become the reprogrammer if you have the right technology. So on to the next trend, I'm going to talk about the relay attack. It's seen on a more minor scale right now. From some contexts in Europe, I know that this is something that they deal with on a much higher scale, but for us, we're just seeing it start to appear. Essentially what this is the crime group will bring technology that can capture the signal from your fob inside your residence. Because most people, like myself, you leave your keys at the front door or somewhere close to your driveway or garage. What will happen is the vehicle recognizes that signal. It's relayed from these devices to the vehicle. It allows entry and start to the vehicle. The second bad guy on scene will jump in and they're ready to drive that vehicle now. So what will happen is that is a shelf life in terms of the signal. So once they get to a certain location, they will have to stop, reprogram that car. But they do it in a much safer, more controlled environment for them. Again, lessening the chances of being detected by police. Here's just a great video. This is a Peel Regional Police surveillance video, like from a homeowner. It really outlines what you're going to see here. He's got that backpack. And you saw the lights flicker. You're going to hear the ignition. It's just that quickly. Like if you could see that, that took probably less than that portion took less than a minute. And we've seen that. We haven't caught, like personally, to this point, we don't have any of those devices seized yet, but I'm sure it's coming. Okay, moving on, you have fraud financing, very prevalent. It's not something that we specifically focus on because our financial crime units will do that, but we do see it, and we did see it in Majestic. We see a lot of fraud finance vehicles mixed in with the traditional theft vehicles. And essentially, I'll just run you through that. You'd have your organized crime group, and they'll either use what's called a straw buyer, which is someone who's just paid to go into a dealership. They're paid a small amount to finance the vehicle, and they turn it over and they're never heard from again. But we also saw quite a bit of synthetic entities being created. And what will happen is the crime group creates an entity, and then they start to build documents. They build credit through easy to gain credit cards and falsified documents. And then when they're ready, they'll go ahead and finance as many vehicles as possible in a specific time period. We've seen that they'll do that so that they avoid the credit bureau being aware of 3-4 applications being issued on the same time. And once those vehicles are gained, they're almost immediately taken to the warehouse related to the shipping, and they will be containerized and shipped overseas. This was some documents we've seized recently. Just shows a fully fraudulent passport, fully fraudulent Government of Canada ID card. It's fairly slick. This idea where they've created a credit card, easy Walmart credit card, they build it up, they pay it off, and they actually build the credit for the synthetic entity in preparation for the fraud, for the major fraud. And this was an actual vehicle that we seized during Majestic. It is a very nice Jeep Wrangler. From our experience, what we've seen recently is The vehicles going to the Middle East are specific to, mainly SUVs, Jeep, four-wheel drive vehicles, and if possible, white is the color of choice, possibly related to, the heat in those countries that they prefer a white vehicle, but that's almost a sure sign that you're looking at a fraud finance. And the last trend to discuss would be the owner-involved theft, whereby the owner sells or gives up their vehicle to a member of the crime group. The vehicle is shipped overseas. Once the vehicle is shipped, the owner then reports it as stolen to police. And the owner receives replacement costs from the insurance company. It's an interesting thing because there's all different reasons why someone would give up their vehicle to be shipped. It could be it's simply a money-making venture criminally. It could be that they're done, it's almost at the end of their payments and they're looking to just get rid of it, move on to a new vehicle. Either way, the crime group capitalizes on this. It's very lucrative. It's hard to prove because it won't be reported until the vehicle is shipped. And so the reportee is not worried about, the vehicle being located and then being found out by the police. It's a very expensive vehicle that was an owner give up. An owner-involved theft from Majestic, very high value, $100,000 plus vehicle that was set to be shipped to the Middle East. I'm just going to introduce quickly Project Majestic, and then Greg's going to take over. Majestic was a joint agency investigation formed to combat the growing trend of high-value vehicles stolen from residential driveways overnight. We had a shared goal of dismantling an identified organized crime group trafficking stolen vehicles overseas. Specific vehicles targeted by the OC group were identified as newer model Lexus and Toyota SUVs, with the most predominant vehicles being the RX 350 and the Highlander. And the reasons being is they're easy to steal and definitely carry a high value overseas. Those two vehicles are the number 1 and 2 stolen shipped vehicles that we're seeing in the Greater Toronto area. Just some stats. It was really, Majestic was really a culmination of our units had been working together for a long period of time, kind of unofficially, and we had looked at, this serious trend of these vehicles being stolen. And when you combine our statistics with York, Peel, and Toronto, we had more than 1,600 specific thefts in 2020. And really it was disjointed, and we found that working together was the best way to tackle such sense, like one of the groups that's involved. And that's what led to the decision to kind of come together as a group. Our other major partner in this investigation was the Toronto Police Service. And at that time, it was known as they had a unit known as the Auto Theft Suppression. That unit was almost like a temporary unit that was set up to deal with this specific trend for a specific time period. And they worked conjunctively with us during Majestic. And that just shows some of the partners involved, York, Peel, Toronto, Durham, and major partners in this as well were the CBSA, who assisted us with all the different seizures and interdictions with the containers, as well as the Insurance Bureau of Canada, providing support and guidance when it came to the recovery of the vehicles. I'm going to turn it over to Greg now and just let him continue on with the Project Majestic story.
So Majestic came into formation through some information that came through the late summer and early fall as a result of some ongoing investigation and actually some shared information that came in from our partners out east working the ports. So we basically kind of went through, dug back on some paperwork and looked into a couple of things. We were able to identify a source that was able to provide us with some pretty significant information. And from that, we decided that with the crossover between York, Toronto, Durham, and everything that was going on, that we needed to kind of get things in action and work as a team, work together and come to a resolution with this. So management came together between York, Toronto, and Peel, and myself and Scott were the chosen ones to lead the investigation in relation to this, headed out of York Regional Police with the assistance of the named parties. The Majestic team consisted of 28 individuals. There was an 8-member inside investigative team, 2 dedicated surveillance teams working day and afternoons, and 3 civilian analysts that compiled a lot of data in relation to TDRs, trackers, pole cams, and license plate readers that we used. The investigation started in January and ran for a 60-day period and ended up with takedowns in mid-March. Investigators at that time went through and identified the hierarchy within the criminal organization and the clearly identified positions and roles. I can't stress enough how much source information is valuable, and take the time to debrief individuals, or if someone has the information and says that they want to talk to you, that's always take that information and look into that. You can always determine and corroborate where people lay and what their role specific is to the organization. And that's where us as investigators go through and do that stuff. So you always have the thief, the organizer, and the loader. And then you always have a shipper and an organizer overseas. Somebody has to be receiving that property on the tail end of everything. And that's where we go through. So we utilized a lot of intelligence from several previous investigations, and we identified that through a lot of the shipping documents, from the container numbers and different locations that we've identified throughout the GTA that we're using these to ship, that a lot of common processes that the containers were going to Nigeria, Ghana, Lebanon, and the UAE, so United Arab Emirates, specifically Dubai in that area. Intelligence identified that the stolen vehicles were sold for approximately the retail value in Canada once they arrived overseas. You have to remember that a vehicle is really only worth about 20% of its value when it's originally stolen until they actually have a buyer for it. We used a lot of investigative surveillance techniques to discover a couple of illicit warehouses that were being operated by the crime group. These were put in by physical surveillance and tracking documents and working backwards at the onset. The same time, surveillance was conducted on known auto thieves with linkage to theft hotspots and the related trends. So that's one thing where you need to kind of go around and look at your cool out spots, identify where you're finding these local stolen vehicles and where they're going to after the fact, not just simply as pulling up, doing a recovery and moving on forward with that. So with Majestic, we ended up, had a couple shipping locations in Mississauga, and we were fortunate enough right on the onset coming to York that literally within 3 days, the Mississauga warehouses were packed up and they had actually moved out to Scarborough. So Scarborough was obviously within the Toronto police area, and a lot easier for us working out of York, kind of in the central region of everything that was going on. So this just goes to show the unsuspecting building the way it is. This is from the front. You see this, nothing too complex. You know, you've got a Toyota Corolla sitting out front. That is an Enterprise Jeep rental that's sitting there. You've got a white Audi that's reversed in, and then a black Range Rover. So that black Range Rover is actually shown in a previous slide that was registered as an owner give up to someone else. So this is the front of the warehouse in Scarborough, and this is the back. It's kind of a horseshoe shape. And at the back, you can see in the corner there, kind of hidden off from everything, where the sea container is parked, is a loading ramp next to a tow truck that they had sitting there. So essentially, they would just drive into the complex, come around the back of the building, and then someone would be there waiting for them to open the door at the back, and the vehicle would go right inside. So you wouldn't actually physically see that vehicle parked out front of the business, aside from the Range Rover that actually was. So you can see in this one, just above the loading doors there is a couple security cameras that are set up, multiple doors and multiple containers. So when you're looking at a sea container, or a sea can as we call them, you'll see the one labeled there with text. On the right-hand side, up and down and vertical, there is going to be 4 letters, and then a series of numbers after that. So anytime that you're flagging a container, or you're going to provide that container tracking information to CBSA, or CP rail or CN. Those are numbers that you're going to be required to have that will show the tracking on that container. And that is honestly the only way that anything is tracked in that aspect. So we ended up using some different interdiction strategies to identify sea containers used by the crime group to traffic the stolen vehicles. As I previously just spoke, with the assistance of Canada Border Services Agency, dozens of sea containers linked to the crime group were flagged and examined in the Greater Toronto area and at the Port of Montreal. Different things that we did do was the odd time we would allow some containers to move on to the Port of Montreal. We'd also let some go out east to Halifax just to buy us some time. With COVID and everything that was going on, everything was approximately 4 to 6 weeks delayed. So we did get a good buy time when it came to offloading these containers. Some of the containers that we would do locally, we would bring into the bonded warehouse, offload the vehicles and send the containers off empty. So it would buy us some time in relation to the recovery of the vehicles and further our investigation. Through surveillance, we identified the modus operandi for the crime group. We noticed that the vehicles were being stolen by local thieves and also for thieves from out of town and taken to cool-off locations. So these cool-off locations that we identified during the COVID period was essentially the side of the street, the end of courts or dead-end streets, and also local shopping plazas, some that were fairly busy, some locations where rental cars were parked. Anything that would, if a vehicle sat there for maybe a 2 or 3 day period in a commercial plaza, it wouldn't look too out of place. So then we identified that the vehicles were then being moved to generally an intermediary group or a second cool-off location at some point. Some vehicles there at that point ended up being revinned or cloned. And then some were also just being moved to the warehouse that we identified in Scarborough, where the vehicles were being prepared and processed for shipping. This essentially here is just a picture of one of the vehicles parked at a known cool-off location. It's reversed in, snow's cleared off just the night that it gets stolen and gets reversed into the parking lot. Also of note, during surveillance on a couple occasions, these known locations where the vehicles were parked is different crime groups or different thief organizations competing against each other or sometimes competing together to obtain these vehicles. Some of the surveillance teams were actually available or had the opportunity to observe another thief actually come and attempt to reprogram and steal another previously already stolen vehicle from the crime group at this cool-off location. So that's another thing that we observed. This was taken by the York surveillance team. They work in conjunction with each other all the time and do a great job. This is just a couple, you can see 2 Lexuses parked in tandem there, where they are parked outside of high-rise apartment buildings. So it's not going to be uncommon for vehicles to be parked there for 12 to 24 hours and nobody coming to them or not. And actually in the back of the picture there, the red Dodge Avenger that's sitting in there is a Quebec plated vehicle. And that was actually one of the thieves that was moving around and running in tandem, following them around to drop off vehicles to secondary cool-off locations. So once the vehicles have been containerized and then trucked to the rail terminals for export via the ports of Montreal and Halifax, the crime groups will attempt to bypass CBSA inspection, we found, and they were actually trucking them directly to the Port of Montreal. We had some that were going in 40-foot containers and the full-size sea containers, and some others were actually being loaded into just straight 53-foot transport trucks, concealing what exactly is in there. So this is just the containers parked in a trucking yard, and then this is also the just what the inside of a rail yard looks like. Basically, when things are being loaded on and containered. You have to remember that this is all like clockwork. These trains are all on schedule and timed. So if a container makes it to the rail yard, it's because it has to be subject to a train that's leaving at a specific time, and the shipping company or the trucking company will be imposed fines if they do not make that. So the crime group utilized different methods to traffic the stolen vehicles in hopes of avoiding detection by police and CBSA. The crime group we found as we went through the project, as we started pulling some containers here locally and some at the Port of Montreal, we actually identified that some of them were then the bill of ladings and the documents being provided to CBSA through the shipping company were in fact being manipulated and changed through different vehicles, false VIN numbers being put through. So the black Range Rover that was shown in the previous slide was observed during surveillance at the warehouse being operated by some of our loaders, and was actually followed from the shipping location to a residence of a high-rise apartment building one night. Surveillance was conducted and they were observed moving around. A couple of days later, that same vehicle was observed at the high-rise, and with the assistance of Canada Border Services Agency, it was identified that they actually went from using rail and transport trucks, that they had actually paid approximately $18,000 up front to have this Range Rover flown directly to Dubai. So that was set aside and that was seized from us. So this just touches again on the 53-foot cargo trailers that were being used. So just as your normal grocery items or household items are delivered or sent around, you know, these three vehicles were ended up being loaded. There's what we call as hot loaded in an industrial area with a ramp where they're put in. Now you have to keep in mind that these vehicles are loaded in there, but they're not secured. So if they were to be in a collision or have any incident, it would end up being a large projectile that's, you know, a couple £1,000-pound item that's going to be sent out and cause some significant damage while traveling across the highways. This is just another warehouse. This just kind of shows, you know, how easy it is to hot load and put vehicles in there. We also identified that a small number of the auto thefts were being dismantled at a chop shop in the Markham area. Dismantling the vehicles allows the crime group to sell the various parts for a significant profit. This comes with the assistance of Insurance Board of Canada and the insurance partners that we deal with on a regular basis from staged accidents, where a lot of these vehicles, the numbers that are sold, your Hondas, your Toyotas, your Lexuses that are involved in the crashes, that it gives the opportunity for black market buyers to purchase fenders, motors, airbags, and other parts that happen. So this one here is an area in Markham. Unsuspecting, just kind of looks like your typical construction utility yard. And inside the homemade built shed here is a Toyota 4Runner that has been completely dismantled and pulled apart. So you can see the front end axle, the engine, shock towers, doors, where those parts would then be sold off to chop shops rather than with that. This was some money that was seized during the course of that chop shop. Basically, York investigators went in, the surveillance team, and had to freeze this due to the vehicle being dismantled when they actually went in with some torches. So that just goes to show that's a bit of profit right there from some parts being sold off already. So you can imagine how much money they make when they do multiple vehicles at a time. During the investigation and coming to its conclusion, 13 search warrants were executed at commercial and residential locations throughout the Greater Toronto area and one residence in Quebec. This was identified through TDRs and different technical data that was utilized. We had the assistance of Ottawa Police Service as well as Longueuil and Laval, helping us out with a bunch of these individuals. So the culmination of everything between everybody, we had 170 charges laid, 18 different accused parties, and as you can see, multiple provinces. It's just some of the individuals involved. You know, you can see the different organized crime groups that have got together. Basically, we had some going to Dubai, some going over to Africa, and then we actually identified a shipping company / car dealership down in Nigeria, where the vehicles were actually being sold and individuals were sending wire transfers and money payments to the individuals up here in Canada for profit. So at the end of the day, it's the insurance payout on an owner give up. And then some of these vehicles going down there, they're making a substantial profit. This was some of the Montreal thieves that were targeted. Coming here with the COVID curfew and other things going on in Quebec with it being shut down, they were able to come here, obviously, with no borders or anything, and essentially wreak havoc on the GTA, stealing multiple cars per night. These individuals weren't also just stealing cars, but it was identified that they're involved in other profitable crimes such as prostitution, human trafficking, and frauds. Keeping in mind as well, 2 vehicle stops in relation to this investigation resulted in, or close to this investigation, resulted in firearms being located on vehicles traveling through the Greater Toronto area and the corridor between Toronto and Montreal. So end up with 72 high value vehicles with an approximate value of $4.5 million were recovered. And this was in thanks to CBSA, the utilization of Interpol and other law enforcement officers and agency partners really across the globe, especially with the assistance of CBSA. And that's all in relation to those tracking numbers from the sea containers and really going through things. The affiant was, tasked with a lot of things and did a very great job in relation to all the search warrant executions and getting everything going. Phones were analyzed, Instagram accounts were identified, and just through the computer systems that were seized in the warehouses, we were able to identify approximately, I believe, another 20 to 25 containers that we didn't even know that were being loaded and shipped from a different location. So that just shows the value of, what you think you have on face value is dig a little deeper. And it's amazing what you can find. And you got to think those 20 to 25 containers, that's 3 vehicles per container on the average of probably $50,000 per car. That's a lot of money that's going to be coming back that, you and I and Scott as a consumer end up having to pay out of our pockets for this stuff. So this is just some of the vehicles after they were recovered and offloaded. You can see they're all, we focused our investigation on the 2016 to 2020 vehicles for those model years. And that's the stats that are being provided. This, we focused Toyota, Lexus, a few Hondas were put into the mix as well, but that's a substantial dent, in the car manufacturing world. And I'll turn it over to Scott here for any questions or anything that needs to be done, but.
Okay, thanks very much, everyone, for if you've come to the session, you enjoyed it, and we'll be available on Thursday to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.